All right. Perfect. All right. So we're going to begin in just a few seconds. Just a quick reminder that if you are able to add your pronouns to your display name on Zoom, like I have, please go ahead and do so. And if you don't know how to do that, you can change your display name by clicking participants and then hovering over your name in the right corner of the screen, then clicking more, then choosing rename. And I'll pass it off to you, Tatiana.
Hi, everyone. Just bear with me. I'm using my partner's very new, confusing computer, and mine has unfortunately died. So I'm like getting myself situated. But yes, I'm Tatiana. I'm like a light-skinned Latina with long hair, some monarch butterfly earrings against a white wall. I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt, have a chain. I'm wearing red lipstick. There's a mirror behind me. But yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. Tonight we're talking about mutual aid, and we have, I'm so sorry everyone. Today, we're going to be discussing mutual aid and how various organizations approach it. We're joined by Gabriela Aleman from Mission Meals Coalition, who focuses on food access, TJ Holzman from Hotels Not Hospitals, who focus on housing, SF Bayview, who focus on independent journalism. Unfortunately, Tyla Jones and Join the Movement are unable to join us, but we do want to share their incredible work they've been doing, such as their joint initiative of Arm the Girls, and We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For, and their Collective Connections videos, which are viewable at this link that I'm going to drop into the chat. So.
Wonderful. And Tatiana, was there anything else that you wanted to add to your introduction of yourself, or should I go ahead?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I'm Tatiana. I'm one of your cohort mates. I'm I guess an ethnic studies major, women and gender studies major here at CCSF. I'm also a peer educator with Project Survive and Expect to Respect SF, and I live on unceded Yelamu territory and grew up in Hahamanga, which is unceded Tongva territory. I'm gonna pass it off to you, Charlie.
All right, thank you. My name is Charlie. My pronouns are he, him. I am a very light-skinned, white-passing Caribbean Latino. I've got about shoulder length curly hair that's kind of stretched out right now because I had it in a ponytail all day. I've got a bookcase behind me. Other side. I've got a bookcase behind me, the rest of my room, and I'm wearing tortoiseshell glasses, a blue button-up with a queer pink triangle collar studs, I think they're called, and a sweater. And so let me move into the next slide. So one of the practices that we have here is doing a land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge at the beginning of every session that San Francisco is located on the unceded and therefore stolen ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of what is colonially known as the San Francisco Peninsula. As part of our work, at trying to act in solidarity with the indigenous folks of these lands, we encourage non-indigenous members to uplift the work of rematriation by paying land tax. In San Francisco, so-called San Francisco, this is known as the Unican land tax, and the link for that is on this slide and will be posted into the chat if it hasn't been already. We also want to be intentional with how we're creating spaces that are centered on Black folks, indigenous folks, and other people of color. We want to move forward by creating practices to prioritize BIPOC members and to proactively decenter whiteness and dismantle white supremacy, anti-Blackness, misogynoir, and colorism. Because of that, We will open our facilitated discussion to be only open to BIPOC first, centering LGBTQ+ and disabled BIPOC, with the last 5 minutes or so being open to everyone. We're mindful of creating BIPOC-centered spaces in the breakout rooms, so please DM the person marked host in this meeting if you are a white person so that we can mindfully arrange the breakout rooms. And tonight the host is Era. And the chat is always open to everyone. However, we do ask white people to please be mindful over taking up too much space. And as our other practice, the Zoom sessions will continue to be open for anyone to join. Relatedly, we have a mutual aid fund that goes towards paying our speakers for presenting with us, with payments prioritized for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color speakers. Please contribute to the fund if you are a less systems impacted person who is benefiting from this space. And that's another one where the link will be in the chat. We're almost through this sprint. Don't worry, I will shut up soon. One of the last ones, our care coordinators, Tiara and Kari, generally provide collective care during the session with BIPOC prioritized. But today, Era will temporarily be working as the care team as well. Please DM her if you are feeling triggered or re-traumatized or activated by the content that's being discussed tonight. If you need to be provided with care resources, or if you need to go into a breakout room with someone to take a break from the session. Our Zoom moderators will share the anonymous care form in the chat where you can provide feedback on the session. As we've learned in our previous sessions, collective care is, a central tenet of abolition. And I will pass it back to Tatiana.
Thank you, Charlie. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Gabriela from Mission Meals Coalition. Mission Meals Coalition is a mutual aid group of Bay Area organizers, small businesses, and community groups working together to deliver hundreds of groceries and meals each month to food insecure community members. Funded via 100% small dollar donations, Mission Meals Coalition has raised $120,000 and counting to ensure community members have access to food no matter their zip code, housing, or immigration status during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's my pleasure to introduce.
Thank you for the introduction, Tatiana, and thank you everyone who's here. And thank you for reading our mission statement, because we actually need to update that. We are still very much grassroots based, but one thing that I'll go into when I speak about mutual aid is kind of how we're also redistributing funds from credit and from the city that we consider reparations for a lot of the work and impacted folks in our community. So as it was shared, I'm one of the co-founders of Mission Meals Coalition. I'm born and raised here in the Lower Mission being identified as 19th, 20th down to 13th and Mission. And we started our work here. I'd like to call us the first responders of the neighborhood, because it was a lot of the elders in our community who organized before, anything on the internet actually happened in terms of raising funds, getting people together, and having it to what it's grown to now today. We started with a few bucks, honestly, and got 100 tamales from a local bakery that is still within our coalition and provided them to local seniors. And we have now expanded to be providing comprehensive meal support for seniors and unhoused folks and day laborers. We have a pet food program called Patitas, where we support the whole household. We have a dental program to provide toothbrushes and toothpaste and floss every 3 months to our most tiny folk. Even though we started with 6, we're now at 21, I believe, small grassroots organizations as part of our coalition. And so since today's, topic is mutual aid, I'm definitely going to talk for 10, 15 minutes and then open it up to kind of a dialogue, because I think this is such a great and sacred space for all of us to just kind of have these dialogues that we can't really have outside of the internet, really, or when we meet just one-on-one, and to kind of debunk, I think, what mutual aid looks like in real time in the city, in the Mission, one of the most impacted during COVID-19. And so, for us, we see mutual aid as a very circular, especially because a lot of us come from Indigenous backgrounds and Indigenous teachings. We see it as a very circular system, one where we take care of each other without this transactional relationship that you would expect in your traditional institutions, your traditional nonprofits, and especially under capitalism. It's one where we quite literally take care of each other because of our shared humanity. And that is very much at the root of our work at Mission Meals. We believe, and the way we've been taught by our elders, because our coalition is elder-led and we're intergenerational, is that the work that we do is truly, again, based in each other's shared humanity, but because there's nothing more powerful than feeding your neighbor and feeding each other. And even though we are Latinx, very Latinx centric, a lot of our leadership is Latinx, we definitely always want to take time to acknowledge that a lot of the roots of the work that we do, and anyone who is doing food work in the United States, has to acknowledge that it is very much rooted in what the Black Panther Party really implemented decades ago, and that to this day still has an impact. A lot of our work during the beginning of the pandemic, even though it was based on what we call in the Americas canastas básicas, which translated means basic baskets, but back where our parents are from, the co-founders and I are Central and South American. Canastas básicas are provided to folks in more rural areas or who are very food insecure with your white basics. So it's like milk if possible, water, grains, oil, the mere necessities. And so that was kind of how we started our work, and it has since expanded to, you know, be able to provide far more than that. But it definitely takes huge inspiration from what the Black Panthers did with their free breakfast program and a lot of their food work. And in alignment with that, we believe as Mission Meals and everyone within our coalition, that if you can feed a community, you can do quite literally anything. And what I say time and time again, when I'm asked to present or to speak on the topic, it's that when we can meet people's human needs, we can meet their social needs. So for example, housing, healthcare, childcare, XYZ, it's all possible if you can meet, you know, people's human needs. If someone has not had a meal, if someone does not have sustainable food, there is no way that we as a society or as communities can expect people to focus on, you know, going to school or focus on employment. And this is why mutual aid is just so essential. And I think, you know, I don't want to ramble too much all over the place, but one thing we definitely take quite seriously is what it means to collect capital to do this work. And I think, you know, during the pandemic, the word mutual aid has definitely become a buzzword, one where I know I didn't hear it as often until the pandemic hit and it was all over. We're also home to the community fridge. So just like the word mutual aid, we saw community fridges just being romanticized in a way that in real life does not operate like these pictures that you would see in these articles. And, you know, I think that's another quick topic I'd like to cover is just the romanticization of this work, and also how so many of us, you know, even especially Mission Meals during the pandemic, we've been called leaders, we've been called XYZ, but in our spaces, you know, no one wakes up being like, you know, I want to be an activist today. And so many of us who have had food insecurity, so many of us who have faced very many social barriers, the reason we're even in these positions now, it was based and rooted in communal survival. And I think that that's something that I think people forget when they talk about mutual aid or when we have these discussions, is that mutual aid is not just this like feel good thing of, you know, giving your neighbor sugar or XYZ. It's more of like, this is so that we can survive and thrive on our own terms. And if you walk away with anything, I'm hoping, you know, for you all to walk away with that mutual aid gives communities, families, households autonomy. And something that when you participate, or traditionally our communities participate in nonprofits or in larger organizations, is definitely taken away. That's why in our organizing, you won't see us posting people's faces, children's faces, anyone's faces. We were those kids in the lines when we were younger, and we know how dehumanizing that is, how confusing it can be for our elders and guardians and caregivers. And, you know, being that we're in San Francisco, one of the richest cities in the country and in the world, it has been very interesting as we've navigated this pandemic to see how people engage with capital and also an entitlement to what you do with that capital. And when it comes to mutual aid, if you're going to give or you're going to receive, there has to be, the way we see it, an understanding that it's for the shared benefit of a community member you may never meet, a community you may never be a part of in the way that you would hope to or expect to. But again, it's not transactional. And that's something that we're still figuring out a way every day to engage with our donors, with community members, and most recently with the city. Starting in December, a lot of us in our coalition were doing a lot of advocacy work at the city level to let City Hall and other people know that it is not fair that our working class community members, especially those who are unemployed, were giving the little that they had to ensure that we could all eat, when it's our tax dollars that we see are being wasted, that are not being used properly. And we wanted to ensure that tax dollars were in the people's hands, and that we got a say in how we got to use that. And so in turn, at the time, we were able to receive, and it's actually gonna finish out in December, a grocery credit. So because of this advocacy of our elders and all of these organizers, we were able to ensure that a small chunk of city funds were able to be used to a credit that we technically never see the money, but is money even real, but that it covers our groceries for the scale that we're doing. So we started with hundreds of families, and we're now feeding thousands of families across the city, across communities. And we're seeing an elevated capacity to be able to support API community members in the mission, which are one that are definitely just overlooked consistently when it comes to being in Brown spaces. And we just didn't feel like that was okay. And I'm so sorry, I'm like blinking for a second. So many thoughts. But another thing that I think, if anyone has read about what's been going on in the mission in the past few months regarding our community leaders and some of the men and the harm that has happened, I think that, mutual aid and community work, because we're a women-led collective and coalition, also means that we have to hold our own communities accountable. And that's one thing that we've been hearing and seeing, and hopefully soon you guys will hear a lot more about the accountability we'll be asking our own community about, is that mutual aid and this community work has historically and continues to be on the shoulders of women, queer, BIPOC, trans, just the most marginalized community members, because again, it's rooted in survival. It's not rooted in because, again, a lot of us wanted to just wake up and be like, I want to feed my neighbor because I have to. But a lot of us now who do that, because we do have the autonomy to choose that, have it because of the history of needing to do this to literally make it to the next day, to make it to the next week. And I think, Mission Meals hopefully is a testament to what happens when you put community power in people's hands. And that's why for us, it's so important that any movement is intergenerational, that is intersectional to other communities, and that again, no one, no matter where they are in community, is not, any more than another person to be held accountable for their actions, because we are all accountable to one another. And I think that's the beauty of mutual aid. I know I have to wrap it up soon, but I think the beauty of mutual aid is that we are accountable to each other and we support one another, and that without one another, we wouldn't have the impact and the power that we do. And I'm hoping, speaking as someone from the lower mission and from the mission, that my community can also get on board with that soon, because it is having an impact. And even though we do food work, it definitely has an impact beyond just what people, receive at their door or what they're able to eat because of the food we provide. It has ensured that community members can focus on going to school, that their children don't have to stress out, that the trauma that comes from not having enough food is mitigated by our community. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. I apologize if I've been a little over the place, just got off work. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, because I know mutual aid can be a little bit of a confusing topic, especially here in San Francisco. I think it can get a little complicated with the politics around care and, what people consider to be collective care or what other considers to be institutional. So I'll open up the floor, no pressure, for any questions.
Just FYI, Gabriela, after each of the speakers has spoken, we are going to have an open forum.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, and it'll be BIPOC students first, and then we'll open it later on to white students. But yeah, if you have anything else you want to say, you have 5 minutes left. I could listen to you all night. So go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess I'll just circle back with the concept of romanticizing this work. You know, we have been very, very active on the internet in the beginning. We started Mission Meals really because of, you know, my elders being like, Gabby, you need to get on the internet and you need to ask for help because we're not going to be able to do this much longer beyond a week or two. And so I think that's another thing, is using all your tools at your disposal for what you believe in, quite frankly. To speak a little more on my experience here in the Mission, being born and raised, you know, there's different sections of our community. I identify very closely with more of like the grassroots, underground, like elders, señoras, lower Mission type. But there's another section of community who has a lot of collective power here, who believe that, you know, you have to do things old school. Most recently, with a lot of, you know, the news of harm that happened in our community, I was told as an organizer, and Mission Meals was told as a community collective group that, you know, we don't do things on the internet. Like the internet is not a tool that we use. And I'd like to think that the internet is the reason why we even have a collective that's as powerful as it is, because it's autonomous and because it doesn't heed even, you know, to our own, you know, leaders of sorts. And one of the things that, you know, I hope people also walk away with, that I recently learned during all of this, and a message that I walk away with, especially as a young person organizing in mutual aid spaces, is that there's a difference between older people and a difference between elders. And that's why we take our elders very seriously, that older people are people who protect power and elders are people who speak truth to power. And in mutual aid work, it is essential to be able to identify or to, you know, begin exploring what that means for you and your communities, because it has a tremendous generational impact. And that's why we believe as Mission Mules that our work is hopefully going to transcend generations beyond just today. And yes, I see a comment here. Some elders are younger folks too. Yes, yes. I 100% agree. And I just think that for us, it's been one of the most powerful tools to ensure our own safety, especially as women, especially during a time where, you know, people don't talk about how in food mutual aid, as women and femme presenting folks, you have to be incredibly careful when providing food or when you're on your own in different parts of anywhere that you're servicing, and the different implications of engaging in collective care. And it's not to say that when you're in community, you're always going to experience harm, but I think it's just being mindful. And again, going back to the message of not romanticizing this work, of the very real implications of just existing in a world that isn't 100% perfect and isn't 100%, you know, rainbows and daisies. It's a very real space, and it has real implications if we don't take care of one another, and if we don't actually also engage and react in accountability when it comes to harm or preventing harm when providing care. So I hope that wasn't too redundant. So yeah, I'll circle out with that. I hope that that was a little bit of a comprehensive share of how we see mutual aid here in the Lower Mission. And then I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to my job, HOMEY. It is also in the Lower Mission, and it was one of the first organizations to practice mutual aid back when there was extreme gang violence in the Lower Mission. I know I was born in 94, and from 94 to early 2000s, it was pretty bad out here. And they have really been our godparents as Mission Meals. During this time, especially within such a contentious community, and how we organize is also deemed very contentious, and they have been very much a safe haven for us, and I've always been for the most marginalized in our community. So wanted to close out with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriela, for coming to speak to us. It's so funny because I think you're Nicaragüense too.
I am. I'm half Nicaragüense. Are you?
Yeah, I'm Nicoya as well. And when I first came to the Mission District, it was actually in 1994. So I remember what it was like. My grandfather lived at 26th in York. I was recently sharing with some folks like what it was like back in the day, and how we couldn't go trick-or-treating, and how my kindergarten class at what is now Cesar Chavez, like, you know, we went along 24th Street to all the businesses that were there. But yeah, and I wish that there was time that we could talk to you more about your illustration work, but maybe later on in the class too, because I feel like that's very powerful. Oh, it looks like we have another Nicoya in the chat. What's up, Jazz? All right, but I'm going to hand it over to Charlie. Thank you so much. Please stick around for the discussion, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, seconding and echoing everything that Tatiana just said. I learned so much in, even just these little 20 minutes. And I'm super appreciated or I'm super excited rather to hear more from you when we get to the Q&A. But for now, we are going to now go to the folks with Hotels Not Hospitals. And as a quick introduction, Hotels Not Hospitals are organizers and activists working for the rights of unhoused people. Their project spun out of the CCSF Homelessness Working Group, which is part of the Democratic Socialists of America San Francisco chapter and is endorsed by CCSF. Solidarity Works LLC collects donations and promptly uses them to fund the booking of hotel rooms and apartment rentals for unsheltered San Franciscans. So I am super excited to welcome the folks with Hotels Not Hospitals.
Thanks, Charlie. My name is Tyler. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an organizer with Hotels Not Hospitals. I spoke with you all before. I'm a white person wearing a black V-neck t-shirt. I'm sitting indoors. A little bit about me. For those who weren't at the last meeting, I experienced homelessness as a teenager. I've worked fighting evictions for low-income tenants for a decade plus. Currently work at EDC, the Eviction Defense Collaborative, in their shelter client advocacy program, which provides advocates to people being kicked out of city-funded shelters. Hotels Not Hospitals entirely separate from all of that, but it's a little bit of background. So thanks for having me. I'll start my timer. Please cut me off. I'm going to try to get through all of this real quick. Appreciate the opportunity. Just a little recap. Last time I spoke with you all, TJ was going to be here, but TJ couldn't make it, unfortunately. But last time spoke about the landscape of neoliberalism in San Francisco, housing, homelessness, kind of the market-mediated property regime, the state-mediated extra market allocation of housing and that whole matrix, and also the underlying assumptions and political decisions that are masked and kind of exclude the body politic from having any say in who uses land, how it's allocated, and all of that sort of stuff. So right now I want to focus on what Hotels Not Hospitals does, where we originated from, how we've developed, and the trajectory that we're trying to go into. So kind of like what was introduced before, there were some of us with CCSF that were engaged in a tent replacement project. So when people are sleeping on the street in tents, DPW, SFPD will seize tents. We had a project to replace those. And we were doing that for some time. We would fundraise, we would organize with people, develop relationships with people who were sleeping in tents and sleeping outdoors. And then COVID hit. And we decided to put on hold the tent replacement project because we were concerned in February 2020 what sort of health implications there would be to be walking around face to face, talking to people, handing people tents and all of this. So we paused that in consideration for kind of how could we do this safely. And around that time, around March 2020, there was a coalition of folks here who started to push on the city to open up hotel rooms that were being shut down to offer shelter-in-place hotels. There's Do No Harm Coalition, there's the Coalition on Homelessness. There were various groups and people who were pushing for this sort of temporary solution. And that's where the name Hotels Not Hospitals came from. Some of us were kind of in that mix there, joining in the voices to push this forward. And I can't go into all of what transpired, but long story short, we ran with the idea. The city ended up they passed an ordinance saying that 8,000 people should be getting hotel rooms. Mayor Breed said, no, I'm not going to do that. And ultimately 2,000 rooms were ultimately booked, but a number of people that we knew were unsheltered and needing hotel rooms and couldn't get any from the city. And we weren't confident that the city was going to follow through on it, which is pretty a safe assumption to make. And initially what we did was we went to pretty much every nonprofit in San Francisco trying to get them to be like a fiscal sponsor or to take up this work. Basically said, hey, we can do all of the legwork, we can do all the work, we just need a name and somebody to handle the funds and just handle that sort of logistics, and we'll do the rest. And some folks were supportive of the idea, but said they lacked capacity. Some wanted to take a huge chunk of the money, and we ran into a roadblock where nobody was willing to do it. So we eventually just went ahead and did it ourselves. We had a small group of people. What we ended up doing was forming an LLC, got a bank account, put up a GoFundMe, pooled money together, and connected with the people that we knew who needed rooms, and then just started renting hotel rooms. And we started out with blocks of rooms for a month. And I'm not going to say necessarily all of the details where we went through, but we started renting rooms downtown initially. They kicked us out there for not like any conduct reasons, but there's this whole area of how long we should be staying. Some places would only say 28 days, some places would give us 30 days, and we weren't really a money maker, but we were paying a decent amount of money to rent these rooms. We did that for several months, and the folks that we work with are some people that we've known for a while, some people that we just met, and really have taken on the political sort of demands of trying to grapple with why are folks excluded from housing in the first place. So part of the logistics of what we were doing was just raising money, renting rooms, but we tried to push it into like a political action of getting the city to do more. We held a couple of demonstrations last year where we tried to organize around it. We were organizing around the SIP hotel closures. If you recall, back in November and December, the city came out and said that we're going to just close down the city hotels abruptly. The nonprofit providers were like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. We have no end game here. So we joined in calling for the city not to do that. We put together in collaboration with the folks that we have been working with a list of, I think it's like 12 demands or something. I could go through them all, but it's centered around street sweeps. It's closing down the city hotel, not shutting down the SIP hotels, using eminent domain and the power to commandeer private land. Basically, these are the things that us as organizers and us as just human beings would like to see the city to do. Put those forward as, come talk to us. One of our demands is that one of our folks who has been, everybody we've been working with has no path into housing through the city. One of the common misperceptions that people generally have is that, well, if you just cooperate with the system, you'll somehow get placed into housing. And it's just not the reality. So having the mayor come and meet with us and explain to some of our cohorts why they were denied housing, why coordinated entry denied this individual any sort of path into housing is one of our demands. You can go online, we have a website, you can look up kind of the political demands that we have. We have made every effort while doing the kind of logistical work to try to expand the survival network of mutual aid to link up with other sort of efforts there's another group that does grocery runs. We've collaborated to limited degrees with that network, tried to really pull together the organizing effort, and there was a sense back in early COVID that this was an emergency. We need to like pull together. It was beyond in my experience during that time, it was beyond the limited sense of what's going on in reality is just like beyond the pale. It's not acceptable. It's outrageous. Something needs to be done. There's a sense when you have an experience that, how can I try to put this? Oftentimes when I engage with people who talk about homelessness and the right to housing or how things should be better, it seems to be a real lack of visceral understanding of really what the situation is like. Conceptually, you can think about it, but to actually experience it is somewhat different. And that daily emergency feeling got expanded. That's kind of the way that I best can put it. And we tried to harness some of that energy to really make some bigger changes, but unfortunately, we haven't gotten there yet. So what we did in our project was we kind of hit a plateau of how much we could fundraise. We all have, only small donations from regular folks have sustained us the entire time. We haven't gotten, we approached some rich folks and the rich folks wouldn't give us any money. The conversations I had with, people who have a whole bunch of money is, how are we going to solve the entire problem? You're not going to solve the entire problem, so I'm not going to give you anything. Whereas the small donations that have sustained us and that we have used to rent rooms, were just folks who understand that every little bit that you can just give will mean something to somebody. And it's really meant a lot to the folks that we've been working with. So anyway, we hit a plateau of how much money we could raise pretty much each month because we had to extend, and we were just in this cycle of you need to raise money so that we extend the rooms. Otherwise, folks that we're working with are, going to be back out on the street in a pandemic with no options. So we stopped renting new rooms. We plateaued on how many rooms we had. It worked really well as well as we could have hoped. And then they started opening back up. So the rents for the rooms were going to skyrocket. We were basically told from the hotel that we had a pretty good relationship with renting these rooms, that you're not going to be able to afford us anymore. So we were considering what we were going to do. We had thought, I'm not going to put all the different strategies that we considered, but what we ultimately did was we found a landlord who had vacant apartments, and we we transitioned from renting hotel rooms for folks to renting apartments. And we are now guaranteeing, we're a guarantor on apartment leases for folks who were formerly unhoused and now have long-term, are now tenants in housing. We pay the rent every month. So what we do, we call this model that we are, during the transition, a community supported housing model. We try to get monthly donations. If we had 150 people donating $50 a month, we would cover the rent for 7 folks, which is not a huge lift. That's what we've been working on the last few months, is to try to expand the core membership donations so that people are pulling their money together and helping to fund this rent for folks who have no path to housing through the institutions of the city. And that's exciting. There's certainly, it's not romantic work by any stretch. It's really, it's been for I don't know how much to divulge because it's a semi-public forum, but it's been it's been really challenging for everybody. It's been really rewarding for everybody in terms of, you know, just the health impacts of having a safe place to sleep at night is huge. And it's been really great to be able to offer that to some folks. It's a challenge, you know, trying to bring this back to what I was speaking about last week or not last week, but the last time that I was speaking with you all, of like, the system that we're existing in puts pressures on our effort. One of which is that we need to constantly fundraise. You know, having a membership where we're like, this is a union of tenants or community members or whatever, we're just going to like kick down some money each month to give like some stability such that you can have that in this world, has been one of the things that we've been striving towards. Having to navigate the relationship with the landlord and tenant. We explicitly didn't want to be landlords. I personally don't, nobody in our group necessarily did. There's certainly, you know, hierarchies that have to be managed and mindful of when, you know, logistically we're the ones who pull in the money and then disperse the money. We have like, you know, we operate by consensus. We have like, you know, inclusive democratic decision-making within our organization and as we interface with the larger world. But there's the reality of these hierarchies and these structures and these pressures that come down on us. And it's really, from my point of view, like, we either expand or we collapse, and how we manage that and try to link up with the other, you know, survival networks, as I call them, and I think other people call them, is key to the larger success. You know, how we take what we have done, which I think is, you know, it's been a success. It's been limited, but we, you know, operate by like, you know, less than a dozen people have done this. I've spoken with a number of groups, not including the donors. I mean, we've been supported by a large number of people for sure, but doing the day-to-day work, like all the time, it's been a small number of people that have pulled it together. I've made this pitch to a number of neighborhood groups and different organizations, just being like, we understand that housing is and homelessness is this huge issue, and everybody's like, not everybody, but a lot of people are like wringing their hands over it, being like, why doesn't the city do this? Or, you know, how can we pressure the board of supervisors to do that? And what I've tried to impress upon at least some people is, this is not a solution to everything, but this is something that your group, not saying you, but like to other groups, this is the group that this is something that you could be doing right now. It's really not outside of our power as individuals and forming into, you know, groups and collectives to do something like we have done, to form that community and reallocate the resources that we already have circulating in the system to meet people's needs. And that's what, you know, mutual aid does. And you know, how we articulate from that the larger system change and kind of break down the ways that we have a need to pay a landlord. You know, we're subsidizing a landlord. That's just the reality that we live in, and how we link out so that we're actually, you know, retaking housing and land and decision making from either that state system or the you know, capital circulation. I think it's driving us to that. We either do that or we're going to just be subsumed by the larger institutional pressures that we have. And, you know, that's where we're at right now, is trying to manage that transition so that we maintain what we have and we grow and link up with other groups, or it'll just have been a temporary thing. So I think that's, oh, well, one last thing I'll add on this, and I kind of touched on it before, was we need, I feel, you know, within the work that we do, we see a need for not just people engaging in different sort of behavior. Like we have neighborhood groups, we have business improvement districts, we have the community benefit, you know, districts. These are organizations where political formations where people focus on housed folks and pressure the city to take particular actions, which in my view are negative. They have negative impacts on people's lives. We've been trying to kind of use a similar structure formation, but with a different purpose and with a different, I think, culture that really animates it, so that it's one of care and solidarity and cooperation, rather than what is a profit-seeking or, you know, violence underwritten sort of organization. And, you know, we're really just trying to bring this to the larger community, sustaining what we have, bringing it to the larger community and saying, this is replicable. It wouldn't take a whole lot for your neighborhood to set this up. You could have, you know, various forums where people make these decisions. That's what the, you know, democratic idea is about, is that people could actually decide what to do with that vacant property that's sitting over there. Should it be converted into a condominium and get a bunch of rent for the person who owns the title, or should it be used for folks who have been out on the street for 10 years and could really use a place to sleep tonight? So yeah, that's where we're at right now. I appreciate the time to talk to you all again. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us tonight. We're glad to have you back, and glad to, you know, have the wisdom and expertise that you've just shared with us. And I'll pass it to Tatiana.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. So it is 6:52. We're scheduled to have a 10-minute break. So let's come back at 7:02, and we're going to hear from SF Bayview. So thank you, everyone.
it was election day yesterday, and some saw his.
All right, y'all. It's 7:01. Are we all back? Okay. Silence. Okay, just go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you're back, if you're ready to get started.
We're back.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. We will now hear from Nube Brown. Nube Brown is a new African abolitionist and editor of the San Francisco Bayview National Black newspaper. She hosts Prison Focus Radio on KPOO, Poor People's Radio, San Francisco 89.5 and kpoo.com every Thursday, 11 to noon, and also broadcasts Bayview TV breaking news on Instagram at SF Bayview every weekday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. Connect with her at nube@sfbayview.com. All right. Thank you so much, Nube, for being here with us today.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. When Era had talked about the conception of this Build Abolition 101, I was just so moved. It's just amazing to see what people are coming up with to be in beautiful response to this colonizing capitalist imperialist system that seems to have quite a chokehold on things, but to see all of this beautiful work that's being done is just wonderful to be a part of. And I first want to, as I'm on my own personal journey, thinking about mutual aid, it really, to me, just seems acting in shared humanity. And Gabriela and Tyler, the work again that you're doing is, and I feel like us as well here at the Bayview, it's humanizing the experience of what's taking place, because we know that this system is about profits over people and planet. And so again, thank you for the incredible work that y'all are doing. And there is kind of a somewhat new person in my life. And whenever he speaks first, he always gives, acknowledges the ancestors, much like we do here before we start meetings, when we want to acknowledge the stolen, unceded land that we may be on. And I think that those intentions are really important. And so I too want to honor and acknowledge my ancestors and the people that have come before. And I love the distinction between older and elder. Thank you for making that clear. I think that was Gabriela. we do copy editing with in the newspaper. And so I'm constantly wanting to capitalize E for elder for that reason. So thank you for putting words to it, putting a description to what it is that I was trying to do in terms of capitalizing E for elder. That was really beautiful. I want to, so, and before I go on as well, I've always been saying that we are on Yelamu Ohlone land here in San Francisco. And I am understanding that I could be wrong because it's Ramaitush.
So Yelamu is the name of the specific village in where so-called San Francisco sits.
Okay.
The larger language and group that the folks of Yelamu are from is the Ramaitush people. So you got it right. You're good.
No, but I love that. Thank you so much. And this is what I just love about. So for me, just this is a form of mutual aid, right? Education, being in dialogue. And I think that that is so much of what this newspaper is about, right? Being able to bring the voices of the people on the ground, the people that are working it, the people that are experiencing what's taking place, so that we can be in dialogue. So, this newspaper, in terms of this idea of mutual aid, it feels, it's important that we are, again, we are a platform to tell the people's voices. So, and before I say that, I just want to read this because I love our kind of like our statement in our about page. I love that it says, the most visited Black newspaper on the web, second only to The Final Call, and one of a kind print edition that's distributed throughout the Bay Area and mailed to subscribers. But here's my favorite part about our newspaper. It's including thousands of prisoners all over the country. And I feel like this newspaper is about being able to keep the voices alive of people who are constantly being disappeared. The work that we all do in terms of mutual aid are the people that are being disappeared and silenced and sidelined and co-opted and having a narrative about them, us, that here at the newspaper, we have this amazing opportunity to shift. And so we have this beautiful opportunity for the work that we are all doing on the ground for the people, with the people, building that power of the people. It gives us agency through our word. It gives us the tool to be used to counter words that are being used as weapons against us, right? So we have this opportunity to center, again, voices that have voices of people that not only have a lot to say, but have a lot to offer in terms of solutions moving forward, right? We're only going to get that from the people that are experiencing it, right? Because they're the experts. And so, this newspaper becomes I love the word matriation, right? Because that's that language, it sounds to me like it's shifting the narrative, right? And that's what we do here at this newspaper, is we allow voices that are about shaping and shifting the narrative that benefits the people. So it becomes an organizing tool. It becomes a form of dialogue, being able to dialogue with the community. When we get these amazing stories, for instance, here's our new newspaper. We just got it to the printer. Here's our newspaper. And one of the top stories is we charge genocide. That's a big word, right? I mean, but here, yes, we are unapologetically Black focused, right? That doesn't mean that we are exclusionary. It just means that we're going to focus our energies, right, on our Black people. And I also, when I personally, because I do a lot of prisoner work, I just need to say this too. I'm not going to use the word the BIPOC. I want to intentionally say Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the same with like the word LWOP, which is life without the possibility of parole. Because I think, again, what I love about this newspaper is it's about the humanizing. It's about the humanity of the people that are involved in the work and in the storytelling, because it's in the storytelling that we're going to get it. And I want to make sure that we create space to add the texture and the color. So to be able to say life without the possibility of parole means something entirely different than LWOP, for instance. So I want to say that like I feel like this is a part of the mutual aid of the existence of people, is to have a platform where we're not just getting food to people and housing to people, but this is a platform where you can tell the story about that's taking place, the work that everybody's doing, but also our health and well-being, our ability to be able to tell our stories in our way without it being watered down, without it being co-opted, without it being made to be comfortable, is such an important aspect of our well-being. We have to be able to tell our stories. We have to have a place that centers the work that we are doing, the building together that we are doing, told in a way that doesn't, that's pure and that's real. So I love that this newspaper has been around for 45 years under Mary and Willie Radcliffe for the past 30. I've had it for a few months, right? And this building, it's like and the reason I started a little bit with, we send this newspaper to thousands of prisoners. These are our people that have been snatched from our streets, who are the victims of all of the work that we are doing here, right? That requires us to build the people for mutual aid. The lack of housing, the lack of food, nutrition, a clean environment, relevant education, our arts and our culture, all of these things being assaulted by this system, all become pipelines to prison. Not just education, but all of these things. So we need to have a place where we can center the experiences of what people are doing in a place that, again, isn't going to silence or belittle or change the narrative. As a matter of fact, we are going to use words like genocide, because when we're talking about the racist police killings of our Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, that's genocide. When we are talking about people, thousands of people not being able to get proper housing, that's a form of genocide. And not being able to tell your story or share your story and educate each other, and spiritually and mentally and sociopolitically uplift yourselves and each other, that is also a form of genocide. Because all of these things become an assault on our beings, and it weakens us and makes us vulnerable to the prison system. And this newspaper, also, unlike any other paper that I've seen, centers voices from the prisoners. To me, that's part of mutual aid, because these are people that are snatched from our streets. They need to stay in communication with us. They need to get through their experience so that when they get home, they know what the fuck is going on. Sorry, I know that there are maybe younger people that are listening. So being able to be the editor of this newspaper, and I love that Era, I love you and all the rest of you who said, oh yes, let's put the San Francisco newspaper, the San Francisco Bayview National Black newspaper, in the category of mutual aid. And at first I was like, huh. And then it like quickly, it's, as soon as I took that moment, and I want to give a shout out, thank you for doing the break. Like that is so beautiful. See, to me, that's a part of mutual aid. That's a part of understanding that we have to do self-care, right? And in order to do this work, we have to take care of each other. So that is just beautiful, because now that everything is so zoomed out, I so appreciate that. So anyway, I really appreciate this idea of this newspaper being a part of mutual aid, because that is absolutely so true. So, because we are about building power in shared humanity. That is the strongest thread I heard listening to Gabriela and Tyler. I don't know if Gabriela is still here, but I do see Tyler. And I feel like this newspaper is like a connective tissue for the work that's being done on the ground. So when you write your story, or you tell your story and we get it transcribed, or you advertise about what it is that you are doing, you are saying, hey, look, people, we are doing this. That is a way that increases the dialogue and creates, again, that builds that agency for what we're doing and we're deciding, not only its level of value and importance, but from the people, the human beings that are experiencing it. And I can't really say that enough. When I talk about the prisoners, if there is not a place for them, first of all, the idea is to disappear them. The idea is to devalue their existence and control them. We aren't going to allow that to happen here. This newspaper, let me read a couple of what we call love notes that we get from the prisoners. Now, mind you, okay, and I'm going to show you this because look at this beautiful handwriting. Okay, this is a person, I don't know anything about this person, but they're in Texas. And the only thing that I know about them is that they're just another human being that has been captured by this system, right? And their narrative, their story right now, this system has a stranglehold on it. And here at the San Francisco Bayview National Black newspaper, we provide a space for them to be able to express themselves, tell their stories, and reclaim the narrative of who they are. So to me, that is that, and by us sharing each other's, or telling each other's stories and being able to be in dialogue, because we communicate through our newspaper, right? So this is what they say because of what we put in our newspaper. So I am, dear Mr. or Mrs., I am just writing you to let you know that my address has changed. So first of all, they're also responsible people. They let us know that their address has changed because I want to make sure that they get this newspaper. So I am on the Caulfield unit now, and here is the new address. They give the new address, and oh yes, the Bayview is one of the best newspapers that I have ever read. And I would like to thank you and everyone for all the hard work that you do to bring us the best news and information. One more time, thank y'all. Respectfully, James Jr. Williams. See, that's acting in shared humanity, right? That's letting them know that, oh, I'm a human being. And there are other human beings that are out there that want to hear what I have to say. They actually care about me, despite what this system is trying to tell us. That's an upliftment of their spirit, and us too. Because when we show each other gratitude for the work we're doing, how rejuvenating is that for us? I mean, I think, so I'm just kind of expanding out this idea of mutual aid. Like, it's so important, like it becomes that it's so important that we are also uplifting our mental health space, our spiritual health, and our socio-political health, our educational health. And this is how we shift the narrative as well. Like Tyler, you were talking about how, you know, again, the stranglehold on the narrative about who homeless people are, people without housing, right? Here at the newspaper, we get to tell that story, right? Our unhoused folks get to tell their story. If you bring it to us, we're going to put it here. We are going to, because I guess it's really about that being in shared humanity. Acting in shared humanity has to be a part of mutual aid. Aiding each other in making sure that we see each other as another human being. So we can shift and dismantle, in the end, completely dismantle the stranglehold on the narrative that this colonizing capitalist imperialist system has. I know I'm sounding so preachy. But I want to, I think part of one of the things that I love about this newspaper and being able to be a part of how we uplift and care about one another is having the courage to call things what they are. And all of the work that people are doing here, first of all, in terms of abolition, that takes a lot of courage because this system does not want to hear anything about abolition. As a matter of fact, we don't even, so they also don't want to hear anything about mutual aid, because you know what mutual aid means? That means we are relying on each other and not them. We are denying them the opportunity to continue to exploit and extract from us. And again, this newspaper wants to center that part of the movement forward for our survival. Gabriela talked about standing on the shoulders of the work that the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense has done and continues to do, the impact that they have made on what we are doing now is profound. And it takes courage to trust in each other, because we've had centuries of generational trauma indoctrinating us with this idea that we can't rely on each other. We are wholly dependent on this colonizing, capitalist, imperialist, patriarchal, white pathological system. So the work, again, that we are doing, of course, requires mutual aid on every level. And I feel like that's what this newspaper is here, because we have to be able to tell the story. And we have to be able to hear it from each other without it being watered down. So in this newspaper, yes, we're going to call things what it is. We are all about revolution. We are all about abolition. We are all about calling what's been taking place genocide. Whether people like that word or not, it is what is happening. Continually assaulting people, keeping their history from them, keeping their knowledge of self from them, from us, keeping the ability to feed ourselves from us, our ability to house ourselves from us, commodifying and expropriating our arts and our culture. These are all ways that seek to condense us down to a product. And we are not that. We are people. And what I see here is acting in shared humanity. And this newspaper, like I said, we are centering, we've had 2 months of talking about this international tribunal. And here are the 6 charges that are directly related to the work that y'all are doing. We are charging human and civil rights violations for racist police killings of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, hyper incarcerations of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, political incarceration of civil rights, national liberation era revolutionaries and activists, as well as present day activists, environmental racism and its impact on Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, public health racism and disparities and its impact on Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, and genocide of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people as a result of the historic and systemic charges of all of the above. And we are going to say that unapologetically. And guess what? Guilty on all counts, said the international jurors. So the work that we are doing is real. And we want you to be telling that in this newspaper, because that's the dialogue of the people. That's how we build that power in shared humanity. Because everything that this system is trying to do is trying to dehumanize us. And that is genocidal.
Nube?
I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do need to start moving into the Q&A, but
Perfect.
appreciate your wisdom so much. So we will begin our Q&A. We'll be shifting the timeline a little bit, but we'll now begin with the Q&A for our Black colleagues, Indigenous colleagues, and other folks of color who are, in here in community with us. If you are not white, please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type something in the chat to let us know that you'd like to speak, or that you'd like to have your question read aloud for you. And then in the last 5 minutes or so, we will open it up for questions from everyone. And then after the Q&A, we'll go into brief breakout room discussions. And for that, just a reminder, please remember to send a message to Aira, who is marked as the host tonight, to let her know if you're white, so that we can arrange the breakout rooms accordingly. So we are going to start with the question that we ask all of our presenters, and whoever feels called to go first, please go first. In your wildest dreams, how do you imagine us creating an abolitionist world, and how does this overlap with CCSF?
I'll speak up. Oh, sorry, did somebody else have their hand up? I'm sorry. I don't want to,
Go for it. Go for it.
should I go for it? Okay. All right. Um, I'm understanding that in the end, the storytelling just feels incredibly important. This is personal. This that we are in is personal. And I believe that is part of the abolition, is we have to start centering the people and planet over the profits, right? People and planet over everything. And that means telling our stories in a way that continue to counter and dismantle and make into rubble, again, these systems that seek to exploit and extract from us. And I think telling our stories from our own experience, not letting anybody else tell our stories, I feel like is one of the main ways to dismantle and disrupt what is taking place, and and a pathway to abolishing these systems, because it is about, that's about shifting that narrative. So, I mean, that's what I want to see. And so in my wildest dreams, yes, I want to see people and planet over everything, right? That's first, that's the first place that we start from. How is that going to affect the people? How is that going to, when we make this next move, how is that going to empower people's daily life on a holistic way? And part of that is through storytelling, because that's how we find out about the depths of what we want. So that for me is just, that's just a pathway. So that's what I want to see. I want to see people being able to feel like they have the courage to tell their story because they're going to be heard.
That was beautiful. I'll go next. Thank you. I think for me, really, going back to what I shared earlier, food being just fundamental to everyone's, shared experience and shared humanity, is that we get to live in peace, and that we get to live with joy, being in safety as the default, and not just this like every so often feeling or moment. Just honestly, just peace and joy, autonomy and choice. Just communal choice, and one where we don't have to always be operating out of anxiety, operating out of survival, operating out of fear, but operating out of, just living. And I think that that's part of one of the most dehumanizing elements of having to be in positions of need because of all these societal systems, is where you don't get to just like live. And, we are on this planet for such a short period of time, and we should be able to enjoy that time with one another in peace and with joy. And ultimately, that's really what I would love to see.
Yeah, so I believe I answered this before. I don't recall what my response was specifically. I think looking as big a picture as I could summon, I come back to this sense of the world as it exists now, or at least the dominant sort of mode of it, indoctrinates us into a worldview that we're all separate and isolated and atomistic, and the world is a collection of things, and they're for us, or they're for somebody, and the larger environment in which we exist are not of value for their own sake. And I think one of the changes that I'd like to see in my lifetime, I don't know if it's possible, is really that shift of we are part of a longer process and we're of this world. We're not of another world coming into it and using it for whatever devices that we want to manipulate it for, and have, you know, that reconnection with together we are co-creating the history that we're all a part of, and not just witnessing it or documenting kind of the dystopia that we're seeming to create. So the most abstract high level, that's ultimately what I find myself like trying to strive for, is what's our place together co-creating this story, like was said earlier. So yeah, as much as that's my ramble of what I'd like to see abolition of this system.
Okay, so Charlie's power went out, but just to let everyone know. But there's an anonymous question. Any of you want to take it? So how do our speakers, all of you that represent independent media, housing and food, imagine mutual aid being our primary source of interdependency versus current social services and capitalist structures? I can go ahead and copy paste it and put it in the chat so y'all have a visual reference. Just a sec.
I can start to try to take a job at that. I think I would love that. I would love for that to be the ideal. You know, I mentioned earlier how we're operating with the support of a grocery credit. And ideally, you know, when we started our Patreon, for example, to make sure that we could have a sustained monthly, you know, redistribution of funds, the reality is like, you know, and I think going back to talking about the reality of the world we live in, it's just like there has to be this collective buy-in, you know, there has to be this collective of like, this consensus of like, yes, let's engage in collective care. And even in my own community, unfortunately, you know, we have a range of folks who are like, yes, I'm here for it. I'll give what I can, even if they don't have much to give. And then you have other folks who are like, no, if I was able to do this with nothing, then so should everyone else. And I think it's unpacking and providing it, like, you know, just engaging in dialogue with one another for us to get there. I would love that. I also, as someone who has been working and been in proximity to nonprofits since I was like 13, I'm now 26, like a long time, you know, it's one of my frustrations in these spaces because of its proximity, you know, to mutual aid groups and spaces and organizers. It's infuriating to see our tax dollars go to institutions and spaces that literally sometimes waste them or don't use them properly, or with all the, you know, corruption scandals in the city. And I always think of like, you know, our tax dollars are meant to be, you know, that's our money, you know, supporting these systems. And if we could just like divest from that and put it towards community care and collective care, that'd be amazing. So that would be the ideal, because I hate even the fact that we take a credit from the city, but I also, you know, understand we have thousands of families who I would rather them come through Mission Meals than to go through another, you know, food system in my community or through the food bank, where I know that it's more about resource hoarding or just shelling out numbers of service versus actual care that's intentional. So that's my feel on that.
Happy to, do you want to, I'll take a stab at it as well. I think this is something I've thought about and grappled with through the work that we've done. I don't know that there's a hard and fast distinction. I think that there is, so I think it's fair to like make that distinction, but in my view, what we're aiming for is transformation of the existing status quo in institutions and kind of the power concentration, and service providing tends to perpetuate the existing power relations and the system as it is, even when you have people inside of it who maybe personally don't feel that way. It tends to, as a function, just do that. And we are aiming to really subvert the way housing is allocated So with a, political critique of why it is that we're even needed to do the work that we're doing. So, I think it's on a gradation of scale, but that in my mind is the distinction. So we're not justifying, our work is not justifying the status quo. It's aimed at undermining it and transforming it.
Yeah, that I think both of what both of you have said is perfect, and I love the transformation and the undermining. I think is really important, and I think just the idea of, I mean, I guess we just have to model a new way because we've been indoctrinated in a way of doing things, right? And I think, but we also have historical reference, right, of communities relying on each other, right? Us relying on each other. And I do think that, we do have a big task ahead of us in terms of reappropriating, yes, our money that's being used. It's not only being wasted, it's being weaponized against us, right? I mean, it's actually being used against us so that we are, and so, without, harping on what is taking place, I think, again, it's our continued education, because it's a process, it's a transformation. We are used to, our people are used to a way of doing things, right? And so this is an educational process. This is what I love about this Abolition 101. I mean, we really are we're starting with the basics in terms of what we're from here on out, but as well, we do have historical reference around why we are being denied that interdependence. And so it's about that transformation, right? And the undermining by the modeling and basically sticking to our work, So yeah, so I think, again, that's how I feel like that's how our mutual aid is going to work for us.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the work that all of you are doing really speaks to very Bay Area specific legacies. Gabriela mentioned that without the Black Panther Party, which is what attracted the attention of the FBI and COINTELPRO to their work, Tyler, what you brought up around getting people into housing, like out of hotels, being the guarantee of apartments for folks, was incredibly tremendous to me, because it reminded me of the system called the tanda. I don't know if anyone here knows what a tanda is. Yeah.
What is that? To say that one more time? Sorry.
Tanda. It's TANDA.
Yeah.
It's how a lot of folks, people in my family, have actually managed to establish credit and are undocumented. And it's like a Latin American way of borrowing money, essentially. I'm not explaining this very well. I'm not a microeconomist. Oh yeah, Gabriela, yeah, thank you.
Tandas are like the OG way to pay for things in your community with your community. And so, like, let's say all of us here decided to join a tanda, we would each put in, let's say I'm not counting right, like 10 of us, we each put in $100 every month. For 10 months, someone would take the full pool of money. And so you're kind of funding your own, whatever it is you need it for. And I know that in our community, that's how kids have gone to college. That's how houses have been bought. That's how all these things have happened. And funny enough that you mentioned that, I was like, oh my God. One of our co-founders works at MAF, which has formalized tandas here in San Francisco, that has Mission Asset Fund, which has supported a lot of our community folks to do that. And when we were doing food work for Mission Meals in the beginning, when we were running out of funds, a lot of working artists, we put in the funds for the different projects we wanted to do within Mission Meals to expand our work, and it was through this tanda model. So tandas are iconic to Latin American communities, and they're everywhere. They're just named different things in different communities.
Tandas were how I got my teeth fixed when I first came to the States. Fixed. But yeah, no, they're really incredible. Like, they're incredible things, and they're how people have managed. I mean, because through the formalization of them here in the city, it's how people have been able to establish credit. So yeah, I also want to say it is 7:45. I wanted to open up the floor to any white members of the cohort for the next 5 minutes before we go into the breakout room. And once again, feel free to either unmute yourself or raise your hand or drop your question in the chat. It looks like, Charlie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a quick question, but then I also have an anonymous one afterwards. So my question, y'all have been talking, something I especially appreciated hearing was how intergenerational everything is, and how, you know, like, you're building on lineages of work that people have been doing for decades and for centuries, really. And so something that I am curious about is and this is for everybody, what is something that you wish you had known when you were first starting to do the work that you're currently doing?
I'm going to say when I first started, I have to say this. I didn't know that there was an exception clause to the 13th Amendment. I didn't know that there was modern day legal slavery taking place within the country, and that was taking place within our prisons. And yeah, I wish that I would have known that truly, because you talk about intergenerational. We have people, we have our youth to becoming elders in prisons, who are called our political prisoners for apparent, being in the Black Panther Party for self-defense, for instance, right? Political prisoners. So understanding that modern day slavery is taking place within this country is something that not only I wish I knew earlier, because then that would alert me that we are actually being taught true history. So
I want to say really quickly, I'm learning about the 13th Amendment right now. I'm at a Black Studies class. I'm majoring in Black Studies at SF State. And it's really wild how indoctrinated all this racism is. And in this class, it shows you, and it illustrates to you how entrenched this racism is, and how policies have been made and how it has deprived Black people of intergenerational wealth due to being locked out of access of certain institutions, if you will, and it's just really wild that it's come full circle, because it's almost like looking, reading and studying this, it kind of gives you secrets of how to pass and how to be better. And most of the secrets actually come from the OG ancestors, if not the Black Panthers. So it's just it's really funny that you mentioned that, because like I said, slavery was abolished except for a form of punishment, handed out by the state. And if you think about it, most of the prisoners are Black and brown. So this is just perpetuating, you know what I mean? And obviously, you just sat there and said it, but at the end of the day, it's perpetuating shit forward. And I just think that was really interesting. I had to comment on that.
Thank you for adding to that. I think on my end, I've been organizing the mission for a while, but I think with the pandemic and with expanded mutual aid and kind of having families at the helm of it, so it's my family, our co-founder's family, and several families whose children are the ones on the internet, fundraising or on the ground doing different things. We didn't realize, and especially as more of the public facing person, I didn't realize the amount of defending what we do, we had to do within our own community. And I think I already knew that my community is very complex, very complicated, very dynamic, to put it, nicely. But I just didn't realize to what degree and to how much, how lonely it can also be as like a woman of color, a young person, and how being the loudest person in the room is sometimes the safest thing for the people you organize with, to ensure your collective safety and to ensure, that you can keep doing what you want to do, but also just how, doing something that is so contentious can also put you in harm's way, even within your own community. And I think that was like the most depressing part of this throughout the pandemic. And I think especially with just everything that's been going on in the mission regarding some of our male leaders, I think also grieving what it means to be a woman, femme presenting, brown and Black presenting women in the mission, and grieving the fact that even if you fed your community, even if you house your community, even if you do all of these, at the end of the day, you can also still be deemed as just, disposable labor. And that's kind of like the non-romanticized part, I think, of this work. But I think no one told me that when you're organizing, especially in the mission, everything is kind of like cultura cura, all these things. And it's just like so exciting and you want to be a part of it. And it still is, I would say, at least in our spaces, but no one tells you just how complicated it is even internally. Everyone's always talking about the white man or the systems and all these other things, but it's like, yes, but we have to start at home. And if you don't start within the roots of your home, then you can't really branch out anymore, So I think I wish someone had told me that, but I'm excited that we have elders and young folks also engaging in that work so that other generations can kind of be prepared, but also carve out their own futures. And I think that's the cool thing about Mission Meals and everyone who's here speaking about the different collectives we're a part of. We're carving out our own roots. And I think that's incredibly important.
I just want to say that was beautiful, the carving out our own roots. I love all this beautiful language that's being spoken here. It's really just beautiful.
I'll just say very briefly, a mundane thing, I suppose, is I wish I would have known and we would have paid closer attention to the need for very specific direction for new folks. We've gone through ups and downs of like new folks getting energized and coming on board and being like, hey, let's help, and not paying close enough attention to like really developing people into, doing kind of some of the core organizing because we got a million different things to do. I think was something in retrospect that we missed because a lot of folks just kind of like passed right through, but that's how it often goes with just organizing in general.
Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful answers and the wisdom that you shared with us. I believe Tatiana needed to step away. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tatiana, and you're still there, but
oh, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you want to? I wasn't sure if you needed a second, but if you feel up to introducing the breakout rooms, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now until I guess 8:15, 8:20. If at any time you're uncomfortable in your breakout room, feel free to return to the main session. Presenters, Nube, Gabriela, Tyler, you're welcome to stay and join the breakout rooms. However, if you need to leave, totally fine. And we really just want to thank you so much for your presentations today and for your words and your time this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. We popped out of our sessions. But I just really need to say, because it's been brought up, I just want to say this from this context. The Black Panther Party became the most, the biggest threat to internal security not when they were toting their guns. It's when they developed the breakfast program.
Yeah, mutual aid.
That's mutual aid. That was what made them, what J. Edgar Hoover said, that's when it was, when they developed the program to feed the people. That's when they became the greatest threat to internal security. So let's just think about that.
And then realize how the man like decided to make school lunches. I mean, lunches and free lunches are part of schools.
Of course.
You know what I mean? I'm like literally learning about this right now. It's just wild like that. Like it's just really cool because it shows you ways of like counteracting that. Like a prime example is like when we go to protest, there's always a pig in plain clothes listening to everything that we say. And people are out here being dumb as shit, not wearing masks, you know, out here just looking like a fucking fool. And it's just like, you know, like if you sit there and like mutual aid of protection, right? There is one, we went to this anti-Proud Boy rally. I mean, let me not speak on that. Anyway, there was a specific clothing thing at some get together, if you will. And it's just the mutual aid of protection. You know what I mean? Like mutual aid comes in many different ways, but like mutual aid is actually very threatening to systems.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for this very vibrant. I don't know who you're talking about, Alex, in the chat. But yeah, I know that, you know, we can go all night long on this. That being said, I know that we're all pretty tired. We've been in the Zoom mundo for a couple hours. So we're just gonna wrap it up and close it down for the night. I really hope that all y'all can get some rest. Sean, still don't know who you're talking about in that comment. And thank you, Nube, for staying and sitting to talk to us in the breakout room. And yes, everyone, good night.
All right. Good night to all of you. You are all really amazing. What an amazing thing y'all are doing. Abolition 101. All right. Peace out. All power to the people.
All power to the people.